We are ready to start our poster project, and I have my pink saris image open, as well as my layers panel, my text panel, paper libraries, and pattern libraries, which have our custom libraries loaded and ready to go. I do want to open the final version of the poster as a reference image so we can refer to it. It's already been loaded. If you wanted to load yours, just use this icon here and find this image in your working files folder. First thing I want to do is crop out this bottom dark section. So I'll use my crop tool. I think that's going to do nicely. I'll double click inside the crop tool. That does it. Let's apply a surface texture using one of our custom papers. And that was the last effect I did, so it's up at the top of the list. If you need to find it, it's under Surface Control. And so when that dialog pops up, it's got all kinds of settings for us to work with. We will use paper instead of the other options, but we need to choose the particular paper we want. This is one of the bold paper textures I got from one of those temples. This is the one I used on the original. I kind of like it. Stick with that. We just need to decide if it should be softer. I don't think so. If it should be more or less. That looks good. Picture should be way at the top, otherwise it gets very dark. Shine is something you can determine to satisfy your taste. Reflection, I don't think we want either. And then we do have some lighting controls to fiddle with as well. Looks good. So I will click OK. And I will save it in RIF format so that I can keep all of the layer effects and use the iterative save command easily. So let's put that on the desktop and let's call it Pink Saris Poster. Now let's add our text. When I choose my type tool and tap on the image, I find that a text layer is made automatically. I'll just type India with an exclamation point. The color I'd like to use is going to be this teal blue from the skirt. I quite like Gadget, but you can find all sorts of other possible fonts available in your system. So I'm going to try a few more. Decide what you prefer. Well, I'll go back to Gadget. Let's put it on a curve. This curved ribbon should do nicely, and I will zoom in a little bit and use my shape selection to maneuver these to make it perform exactly the way I'd like it to be, and I think that's pretty good. So I'll zoom out again just a little. And I will use an iterative save command so that it now will automatically save this stage as well as the previous stage. Put a drop shadow or an external shadow on the type with shadow attributes down here in the text panel. First, I'll have to apply the external shadow using this icon. Then I can use shadow attributes to make for a blur, and that makes a nice bold statement. I'm just going to maneuver this just a little bit over. So this is another point where we can do an iterative save. Back to the canvas, and I'd like to add a border to the canvas. 60 pixels to each edge. They will be blank white pixels, of course. I'd like to put a pattern fill in that white area. So I will select it with my magic wand. I will choose the pattern I want to use for the fill. How about this turban fabric? Instead of what we had on the original, make a little variation here. And I'll choose the paint bucket. Source image is what we're filling with. That's always the pattern, unless you have a specific image designated as the clone source. So when I tap, I will get that effect. I think that's pretty good. Deselect. Make another rectangular selection right on the central part of the image. And now when I go to the select menu and choose modify and create a border, I'd like that to be 12 pixels. Now that border I can fill with a color. Once again, I think I'll use this teal blue color. use the paint bucket to fill with that color. Let's paint that area there with the tiny spattery air. I remember that as having some interesting variation in colors. Fill. And that looks pretty good. So I'll deselect that. Now create the burn effect that you can see if I zoom out a little bit. Move that around. You can see that I have a burned edge and a drop shadow. So we'll do that by doing a select all and apply a burn. Before I can apply the burn effect, I'm going to have to turn this graphic into a layer. So I will do a select all and a cut, paste, and notice it covered up my text, but if I drag my text to the top, not a problem. Now the graphic is a layer, and so I can apply dynamic plugins such as burn. And I will need to adjust these variables in order to make it just at the very edges so I'm not obliterating my image. We can change a number of these things for some subtle differences, a little bit more jagged. That looks good. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to add a couple more pixels to the right and the bottom so that I can have a drop shadow. So that would be canvas size, 20 pixels to the bottom and 20 pixels to the right. And now I will apply a drop shadow using objects. Under Effects, Objects, Create Drop Shadow. I'll accept the defaults. And notice I have a drop shadow, and I have automatically had a group made consisting of the item itself and the shadow as two separate items. They can be manipulated independently of each other. Well, we've got ourselves a wonderful version of the India travel poster, and there are so many variations. I imagine you will be able to make your version very distinctive.